Good morning, students. We are back again with the last few slides of the important quotes from the story to build a fire. Page 9, the important line is when it is 75 below zero, a man must not fail in his first attempt to build a fire. That is, if his feet are wet. This reference to the title reminds the readers of the central importance of the fire to the man and the short story. Aware of the dangers a wet foot can invite, he begins building a little fire with a shivering frame and numbed fingers. Finally, the man finds some trunks of several small spruce trees and decides to build his fire under one by lightening a small shred of birch bark. A little fire is evinced. Since he was without an imagination, and thus accustomed to think about life and death, he was not afraid of the cold, which he estimated as 50 degrees below zero. Page 10 speaks about the old timer. The lines are those old timers were rather womanish, some of them, he thought. All a man had to do was to keep his head, and he was all right. Any man who was a man could travel alone. Now, see the references. The arrogance of the man epitomizes an arrogance of youth. It also establishes how he believes incorrectly in the superiority of men over nature. The reference to being womanish is disparaging. Terms further highlights a man's embrace of masculinity over femininity. The experience of the old timers will be of greater use than any precise thermometer, whether it is 50 or 75 below zero. But this is not what he thinks. Instead, he scoffs at the experienced man whom he considers rather womanish. Despite this being his first winter in the region, he disregards the advice of the old timer that one must always travel with a partner in such circumstances. His dangerous male chauvinism tells him that, quote, any man who was a man could travel alone. We later see that he travels alone only to die alone. Page 14, the fire provider had failed. This reference to the man as the fire provider demonstrates his status in the eyes of the dog. However, disaster again strikes when he least expected. The branches of the tree under which he built the fire had been fully loaded with snow, and each time he had pulled a twig, a slight agitation had reached the branches. This led to a terrible disaster which the man hadn't foreseen at all. High up in the tree, one bough capsized its load of snow. This fell on the boughs beneath, capsizing them. This process continued, spreading out and involving the whole tree. It grew like an avalanche and it descended without warning upon the man and the fire was bolted out. Another important quote from page 14, he would kill the dog and bury his hands in the warm body until the numbness went out of them. Then he could build another fire. The man's desperation is seen to become heightened here as he contemplates killing the dog to save himself. It's in utter desperation, he looks at the dog and gets reminded of another man who saved himself from freezing by killing a deer and crawling in its carcass. He gets a ruthless idea of killing a dog and using its carcass for warmth. He crawls towards the husky and the dog backs off, sensing danger. It instinctively recoils and backed away. The last page of the story, page 18, again speaks about the animal instinct at the end. Then it turned and trotted up the trail in the direction of the camp it knew, where were the other food providers and fire providers. In the final sentence, the dog heads for food and security, having scented the death of the man. The dog's instinct for self preservation is seen again to be more attuned than the man's. The dog stands there for some time, waiting for the man to rise. With the advent of twilight, it goes near the man, gets the scent of death, and backs off. Finally, it turns around and trots off in the direction of the camp in search of other food and fire providers. Thank you, children. I think we come to the end of the story. Next class, we'll begin with something else. Thank you.